Well, voters in the outer southeastern suburbs of Melbourne will head to the polls for the Dunkley by-election this Saturday. The crucial vote will be a litmus test for both major parties as Australians call for greater action on cost of living, like issues like housing, tax reform, student debt. So how is this all going to play out on Saturday? Let's get more analysis now. I'm joined by Redbridge Group Director Simon Welsh. Simon, you've got a better read than anyone I know on this. I'm sure you've been doing focus groups this week. What is the feedback? Have we moved beyond apathy, or is that still the overwhelming feeling for both major parties?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. No, profound apathy is still the dynamic amongst most voters in that part of the world, and that's not unusual. That's not unusual going into a by-election. I mean, by-elections are often exercises in managing apathy. You don't get the same sort of buy-in, engagement, interest that you do in a general election. By-elections, particularly where they're low stakes by-elections, it's not going to change government. It's not going to have some massive policy implication. Voters sort of disengage. It's political theatre, and we're certainly seeing that. So the issue becomes, who does the apathy favour? Whose voters are more likely to stay home or vote informal or whatever it is than actually lodge a meaningful vote? And so I think what will be worrying the Labor government is that the dynamics around this could sort of create like a reverse Aston. So we saw in the Aston by-election last year, what we saw was the dynamics didn't favour the Liberal voter. So your sort of soft, apathetic Liberal voter didn't have a lot to vote for. There's still a bit of a glow honeymoon period around the government. And we saw a really low turnout, and that turnout really scuppered the Liberal vote. And that's what I think the government will be worried about here, because the apathy is driven by the economic circumstances. They see neither party offering anything much, around cost of living and making material difference in their lives. That hurts more if you're in government. And I think it particularly hurts because the stage 3 rejig just doesn't look like it's really cut through, and I think the way the government would have hoped.
Wow. Okay. So basically, we're talking about Dunkley. I'm just thinking of the dynamics there. In Dunkley, you'd have to think most people are on a median wage, therefore would be getting a bigger tax cut thanks to the Albanese government, but they're not going to be rewarded for it.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is really undefined views still around the stage 3 tax cuts. And like, you might expect that in electorates where there's not currently a by-election going on. Where there's a by-election going on, you would expect and hope to see really defined views around that now. So what we're seeing is, people unsure why these things have been rejigged. So that narrative about, we're sort of trying to rebalance it, make it fairer, hasn't really landed as much as you would like to see. How much I'm going to get, there's a lot of, as I say, sort of undefined, ill-formed views around that. I think it's a little bit. But, one more interest rate rise and that would more than wipe that out. So, I'm still anxious about the future. It hasn't done anything to resolve my underlying anxious. Where most people sort of land are, look, I think I'm getting a bit more. I think I'm going to get a bit of a tax cut. I might get a bit more take-home pay. I'm not sure what it is, but I think I'm getting a bit more. I've heard something about it. And that might be enough to sort of get enough of those sort of soft Labor-leaning voters to the voting booths. But, apathy is not a strategy.
What are the kind of comments that you've got from the focus groups that stick in your mind just a couple of days out from Dunkley?
The stuff that really sticks with you is the personal stuff. It's the stories of the economic hardship. And particularly, and we spoke about this last week, particularly that northern half of the electorate. I think that is going to be so volatile. I don't think it necessarily transfers from from Labor straight to Liberal. I think it's going to spray in a myriad of directions. But, stories of parents who are making such cuts to their grocery bills that they eat their dinner separately from their children because they don't want their children to see them eating baked beans for dinner. Like that sort of stuff, it's a gut punch when you're seeing in a focus group and people talk about that and other things. And I think that shift in the cost of living pressures now, people have eaten through the debt. So, last year it was all about utilities and big ticket pressures. They've eaten through their debt to pay those bills and get through those big ticket things. They are now cutting back on food and groceries. That's where the hurt is. That is primal for people. And I think that's going to really fuel some volatility.
Simon, it's always good to talk to you. It'd be fascinating to see what happens on the weekend. We'll speak to you next week.
Thanks, Laura.
And we've got live coverage, of course, of all the results and reaction from the Dunkley by-election. Our coverage begins 6 p.m. Saturday and it is live from Melbourne.